Hello and welcome to PBCJ Presents, our weekly discussion series in which we examine some of the hot-button issues of the day. I am Simone Absalom Gale. This week, our focus is on education reform. Before the onset of COVID, many questions were raised about our educational system and the role it plays in the 21st century. In most Caribbean countries, the Common Entrance Examination is still in use, a system that determines which students get access to secondary level education. Here in Jamaica, we call this PEP, the Primary Exit Profile Examination. But not everyone supports this form of matriculation from primary level to high school. There have been calls in several quarters for the removal of this exam, as it is deemed to be adding undue pressure on children and causing a high failure rate. Joining us in studio today to discuss the way forward is our own Acting Deputy Chief Education Officer, Dr. Clover Hamilton Flowers. She's joined by St. Lucia's Registrar of Examinations, Carmelita Matthew. And from Trinidad, we have the outspoken education advocate, Kerry Ballantyne. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's start with you, Dr. Hamilton Flowers. First of all, explain the change from the Common Entrance exam to PEP here in Jamaica. Is there really any difference?
Oh, yes, there are significant differences. If we were to go back in time, we would understand that the Common Entrance examination was actually used to help to identify students who would access secondary education. And it would mean that they would also be getting like free places. You know, parents would have to also deal with matters of students' placement in schools, and that was a bit of a challenge. In light of issues, concerns, developments in education, that was changed to what we call our grade 6 achievement test. And if we're talking about achievement, the focus is also checking to see what is it that students would have learned, what it is that they can actually do. So while we would have used GSAT as a way of placing students, the idea was also to pay attention to their achievements.
And
again,
what are the primary concerns you're hearing now about PEP?
Well, I'm hearing you saying that persons have been concerned about the pressure that the children are placed under, and I'm not too sure the extent to which that research was conducted. But when we stop to think about what PEP is, promoting, it's really for us to identify competencies, students' academic competencies, and also to check to see how they're able to handle problem situations that require of them to think critically. So it's a little bit different now from what was done with the GSAT, in that the students are doing different kinds of examinations in terms of like a performance-based kind of assessment, checking to see how well they can reason by way of an ability assessment, and also looking to see the competencies that they would have developed that would be linked specifically to the national standards curriculum.
Okay, let's bring in Ms. Matthew into the conversation. What has been the experience in St. Lucia with the Common Entrance exam?
Okay, the Common Entrance examination is a very old examination, and with this exam, we also looked at students' performance and made assignments to secondary schools based on these performances. So it really assisted in years gone by to identify the best performing students to assign them to secondary school places that were not available for all our students. But right now we have spaces available for all our students. And so students were able to get into secondary schools, everybody, but the exam still served the purpose of identifying which secondary school they would have been assigned to.
All right, Ms. Ballantyne, you have heard from education officials in Jamaica and St. Lucia. What are your thoughts on these exams? Should we do away with them altogether?
Okay, so I don't think exams should be done away with altogether. I think the type of exam needs to be relooked. So there, as Jamaica would have mentioned, that they have done some, I think it's formative exam just to see where the students are at. I'm in favor of those exams. And there are circumstances where the major exams are necessary just to identify where the children are at. However, I think the emphasis on such to promote children to various secondary schools, which really determines, the level and the type of education they will get, and it pretty much puts them in the direction of where it is that they will see their future. So I think that while I'm not in favor of the 11 plus or the common entrance exam, I don't think exams should be done away with completely, but definitely reformed.
All right, we're going to be talking a little bit more about this idea of reform of the education system in terms of the common entrance or the primary exit exams, but we have to take a quick break. You're watching PBCJ Presents. We'll be right back.
The following is brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
When your turn comes for the vaccine, please take the vaccine. It is absolutely important. For those who have hesitancy and fear, and all of that is legitimate, it's healthy. But I believe we have seen the vaccine at work. We know what the risks are. There are no risk-less activities in life. We urge you to participate in the national program and get vaccinated.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Welcome back. You're watching PBCJ Presents. Today we're discussing education reform, particularly primary level education and matriculation to high school. Joining us in studio today, we have our own acting Deputy Chief Education Officer, Dr. Clover Hamilton Flowers. She's joined by St. Lucia's Registrar of Examinations, Carmelita Matthew, and from Trinidad, we have the outspoken education advocate, Kerry Ballantyne. All right, thanks for staying with us. Now, we were talking about the way forward. I want to pose a question to Dr. Hamilton Flowers. Where we have the examination now, but we know that we aim to ensure that we continue to develop on this. Are the days of PEP numbered? Are you looking at changing the exit examination anytime soon?
Well, it will be difficult for me to speak to that at this time because normally for you to make major changes to like your assessment policy or your assessment framework, there must be a kind of consultation, different levels of consultations. We'd have to do the research, and also get the go ahead in terms of those with greater responsibility for education. I'm not seeing us like making any major changes right now because we have basically just started to implement this kind of examination. And when we stop to think about the COVID situation, we have not really had the chance to even implement it like it was intended.
All right, explain now, even though you're not planning to change at any point, but I know that you're continuously assessing the results of this examination. Are you seeing any shortfalls and, looking to correct them?
Okay, so remember, we would have made use of observations if we were to stop and think about the COVID situation. Notice that we made some adjustments to ensure that we were not putting our children at a disadvantage. So I wouldn't want us to think that we're not mindful of the context within which we operate and that we are becoming like a slave, so to speak, to a particular framework. But as we observe and get feedback from the system, we would actually be making use of this information to see how to fine-tune the approach to the assessment. So maybe the duration, you understand? The duration, maybe in terms of how you shape the activities, shape the task, looking at well as how you actually engage the students in the preparations for the assessment, and also in terms of how we prepare teachers and the role that teachers play, and also the role that education officers play, to ensure that we're all on the same page and we're doing our best to make this an experience for the children that's not going to be psychologically damaging for them, providing we actually operate according to standards.
All right, and speaking of changes, let's go over to St. Lucia now. Ms. Matthew, tell us about the new Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment that is replacing the Common Entrance.
Okay, so the CPA, Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment, we were introduced to it from 2012, and since then we've been contemplating, trying to get our policymakers to really buy into it and to get it going in St. Lucia. Well, it's actually an examination that assesses students' literacies in 4 content areas, including mathematics, language, science, and social studies. So students are able to be creative because there is an internal component, which is a formative form of assessment, and there is the external component, which is the summative examination, which is administered by CXC itself. So these are the areas that students will be tested in, and it actually gives the student the time in the classroom to develop, to really exhibit what they are learning during the year that they are in the examination classroom. And it really gives them that opportunity to get some grades from their performance in the formative test assessments before they move on to the final examination, which is the summative exam. So there really is a combination of the internal, the external, which is the formative and summative components of the CXC CPA examination.
All right, let's bring in Ms. Ballantyne here. What do you see as a fair system of assessment going forward? Because everybody is making changes, as the years go by based on their situation in their country. But in your opinion, a fair system of assessment going forward, what would you envision?
A fair system, to me.
Yeah, to you.
Based really on the individual, because at the end of the day, we're all different individuals, and I understand and I appreciate that at a country level, we have to have some form of assessment. But my belief is that each person is different, and the way that we learn is different. And so assessment should be on a person's strength rather than on an across the board standard. That's my opinion.
All right, we're going to be moving away from the actual primary exit exam and looking at the broader area of curriculum reform. When we get back, we're going to take a short break. You're watching PBCJ Presents.
I wish to inform Jamaica that the government has already launched Operation Get Every Illegal Gun. My message today, therefore, is directed to the many young men who have illegal weapons in their possession, who hide the weapons, or as they say, lock them. And I'm speaking as well to the girlfriends, the baby mothers, the sisters and the mothers who give them cover and protection. I'm giving you warning. Put down the gun. Give it up. Leave the gang. Dissociate yourself from the gunmen. Otherwise, the consequences will be grim.
Welcome back to PBCJ Presents. We're talking about education reform. Now let's move away from the actual primary exit exam and look at the broader area of curriculum reform. Ms. Ballantyne, what do you think is most needed here?
So certainly the incorporating use of technology into the system, right? In the workplace, we use it all the time, and I know that we speak about at the the secondary level, incorporating certain things like performance-based assessments and stuff like that. But certainly at the primary school level, given that everybody uses technology today, my daughters are able to pick up a device and maneuver through it better than I can. And so the use of technology to assess continuously where they are, I don't believe I have a fundamental problem with the details in the curriculum. It's just really how it is taught to children. Right now you have 30 plus students and one teacher at the top of the room teaching to these 30 persons who come from different backgrounds, understand and internalize things differently. Technology has come a long way. They're able to, at the drop of a hat, assess or understand where each child in a classroom is at. The incorporation of technology is a big thing for me, as well as, project-based learning, allowing the children to ask the questions that they need to ask, have an input into what and how and what rate they learn, because everybody is different.
All right, thanks, Kerry. Now over to St. Lucia. What is St. Lucia focusing on in this area of reform? What are you focusing on at this time?
Okay, what we are focusing on is the internal component, giving students the ability to be assessed in a formative environment, that they're in the classroom and based on what they are doing, what is being taught, what is being learned, they are gradually being assessed. This is what we are focusing on. We are moving away from our one-shot examination and moving towards this where we are giving them the opportunity to demonstrate what they are learning and giving also them the opportunity for the teacher to assist them in correcting some of the areas that they have fallen short on. So the formative assessment really helps them in that way and preparing them for that summative examination. So this is the new area that we are really using to provide this final results that we did not have in our own common entrance examination.
All right, good. So generally, we are coming off of 2 years of homeschooling due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What are the gaps that you're seeing now that need to be closed, starting with you, Ms. Matthew?
Okay, so the gaps that we see that we really need to work on is the use of technology and the accessibility when it comes to students and getting access at home to the devices and also Wi-Fi, internet connectivity. We need to really strengthen this area because the gap is very wide and we need to close on it and to ensure that students are given this opportunity to get that technological inclination increased and to assist them in learning through technology. So this is where we need to strengthen and to close on that gap.
All right, let's get the experience of Jamaica. Dr. Hamilton Flowers, how is the ministry dealing with the gaps that have come into play?
Well, we should understand that for us to treat any gap at all, we need data. So we would have started out with, carrying out some assessment where early in the process, we provided the system with diagnostic assessment items, tools, and the schools were given that opportunity to administer, collect data about students' readiness based on the information. But we would have also encouraged schools to make use of other means of obtaining information about students. So it's not just in terms of their knowledge of concepts,
all right,
but paying attention as well to their readiness in terms of access to technology, like somebody would have said, and see how do we make use of this kind of information now to shape what we would call their own learning plan. So trying to customize the learning for students would have been something important. and would have also provided for the system a framework to help them to pull together a kind of learning intervention plan. So there is a national learning intervention planning framework, and the system would have been exposed to this, and they have access to it to help them to shape what they understand would be relevant to their own school situation.
All right, speaking of, persons making decisions based on their own school situation, a recent survey by the National Education Inspectorate here in Jamaica revealed that 49% of students reported that their teachers were absent from their online classes, and that students felt that the feedback was inadequate during online lessons. How is your ministry addressing these specific concerns and indeed closing the learning gap that has been worsened by the pandemic?
All right, so we understand that capacity building is very, very important. Early in the process, we started some training exercises with our teachers, with our principals, and we continue to embark on these kinds of initiatives to help to develop our teachers in terms of using the technology, and also in terms of how to engage the students by way of, say, an online context. We understand some of the struggles now with our students, in the face-to-face setting. And so as a part of helping with this, we're also providing like psychosocial support for teachers, parents, our students, and also making use of other strategies as a way of helping everybody to be on the same page, and also to see how we can work more closely together using communities.
Let's go on over to Trinidad, though. Recently, they went back to face-to-face classes. Let us know, Kerry, about the experience so far. What's been happening?
On April 19th, face-to-face classes started back in Trinidad, so that saw most of the student population going back out. There's some schools that haven't started as yet. The children are happy to be back out, engaging with their friends. My understanding is that the turnout rate was around, on average, 50%, around 50%. That's in primary as well as secondary, with secondary turnout rate being a little higher than the average. But based on the feedback that I've gotten, most is going well.
Dr. Hamilton Flowers, in terms of socializing, re-socializing our students, there have been some incidences, violence in schools, and some hiccups. Tell us what's been happening, what has the ministry put in place, and how is it going so far to counteract that challenge that has come up?
All right, so you did mention earlier about learning gap, and this is pointing to the fact that we can't consider learning gap to be only in terms of students' understanding of concepts within a particular discipline, but even in terms of how they interact with each other. So that would be a critical area for us to consider. So we have been providing psychosocial support to our students. We have been having different activities in schools, and we have, for example, a guidance unit working closely with schools to help schools to design their intervention activities and to actually implement and get the support that is necessary, to help students to better work together. We continue to make use of resources. For example, we have like television programs. We continue to make use of these as opportunities for students' interactions. Something that we are promoting as a very important part of students' program design is to engage them in farm time sessions. These are to be empowering sessions. These are to be reflective, giving students the opportunity to just open up, and share what's happening to them, and also helping them to identify those qualities that they're seeing in each other that should actually be promoted. We are also encouraging greater use of like a project-based approach to learning to get students to, manipulate materials, manipulate ideas, and as a way of helping learning to be fun. Not too sure if you have been seeing how for some schools they're pulling on the creative areas as a way of helping students to, unburden, to just release some of the tensions, and also for them to get up to laugh. Because a good medicine is if you're happy. So making use of those strategies that will help students to be happy is one of the ways that we're also putting on the table.
All right, I have a general question now. In terms of those students now who are more geared towards skills instead of just academic reading and writing, what are some of the ways in which you're planning to deal with this? Let's start with St. Lucia.
Okay, so the students who are more academically inclined or skilled, we have various programs, the technical vocational aspects in the schools where they are able to develop their skills and to identify the areas that they are more interested in. Also, in the primary schools, we still have programs that we would draw the students towards the more technical areas and to have them also to demonstrate the skills that they are more proficient in as well.
Interesting, interesting. Let's see what's happening in Jamaica. What are we doing? We're coming out of a pandemic. Everybody has been home, but you have some students who want to get on it, use their hands. You know, what are we doing to facilitate that area?
That's part of the design of our curriculum, because from grade 1, students engage in vocational kinds of activities. But even when we look at what happens from 4 to 6, they actually engage in projects using like STEM approach to learning. When it comes to the upper secondary level, however, we want to remember that specialization is available to students. So students can choose a path that is primarily technical vocational in focus, but we also encourage, regardless of the program of study, that each student should actually be exposed to a vocational area. So that's the understanding, and we are getting the support, we're getting the buy-in from our schools and also from students. So we're seeing more students actually selecting to do vocational areas.
We have CXC across the board, right?
Yep.
Within the Caribbean, do you think it would be a good thing for the primary level to have just one exam for matriculation across the board?
Absolutely not. Again, so I'll go back to my point where I believe that one exam it doesn't give you an accurate snapshot of the capacity of a child, right? And I am all for continuous assessment, formative, and I understand and appreciate the necessity for summative assessment, but one assessment, I do not agree.
And you've been watching PBCJ Presents. Our topic this week, education reform. Thanks to my special guests, Acting Deputy Chief Education Officer of Jamaica, Dr. Clover Hamilton Flowers, St. Lucia's Registrar of Examinations, Ms. Carmelita Matthew, and in Trinidad, the outspoken education advocate, Kerry Ballantyne. Thanks so much for watching.